Welcome back to Let's Unpack That, the podcast where two somewhat recent college graduates discuss books that they read as tweens and pre-tweens and tweenagers and discuss them in different ways such as socio-political and literary analysis. As is our educational background training, we have to put our liberal arts degrees into good use somehow, and hence, here we are. I'm Nina.
I'm Lydia.
And this is episode 6. So by the time that this episode comes out, so we're recording several weeks in advance thanks to our super cool new recording schedule because we are adulting, I guess. This is going to come out right before Valentine's Day. Or actually, I think it's going to be released on Valentine's Day. Lydia, do you have a favorite Valentine's Day memory?
Not really. I mean, I haven't celebrated it in years. Hashtag single. So, I mean, I haven't really paid attention to it. I remember last year I didn't even realize that it was Valentine's Day. It really doesn't register.
Yeah, Anthony came up to me and was like, so what are we doing for Valentine's Day? And I kind of did a double take. It was like, what? Oh, yeah, that's a thing. Even though he didn't ask, my favorite memory is actually I wouldn't say my favorite memory. I think this is the only one that stands out as being a somewhat memorable Valentine's Day. I just remember at one point, the boyfriend I had in high school took me out for fondue at this really fancy restaurant. And we did that for Valentine's Day one year. So, good food. That always is a good one for a Valentine's Day memory. But to all of you who do celebrate Valentine's Day, happy Valentine's Day. For those of you who don't celebrate it, happy Friday or Saturday or Sunday or whenever you're catching up on all of this. Hoping you're having a good life.
Yeah. Speaking of Valentine's Day, though, I think this is where we should start the episode. I wonder if Pan Am has it because Valentine's Day dates back to the Roman Empire, and it is said, to quote the site that I looked at, that the Rome of ancient times, people observed a holiday on February 14th to honor Juno, the queen of Roman gods and goddesses. The Romans also regarded Juno as the goddess of women and marriage. On the following day, February 15th, began the fertility festival called the Feast of Lupercalia. The Festival of Lupercalia was celebrated to honor the gods Lupercus and Faunus, the Roman god of agriculture, besides also the legendary founders of Rome, Romulus and Remus. So, Valentine's Day is a kickoff for the Roman fuckfest.
So, you're telling me that the word lubrication and lube comes from a Roman god?
No, Lupercalia. With a P, not a B.
Okay. Well,
get nasty.
That's what it sounded like to me. I'm sorry.
Are you caught up on Sabrina the Teenage Witch? Because in one episode, they celebrate the Feast of Lupercalia.
Oh my God. No, I'm not caught up, and I should probably get caught up. I'm binge watching Big Little Lies right now because I just finished the audiobook. And I love it. I just got to watch a scene where Laura Dern fucks her husband in the bathroom, and it's hilarious. But which is also funny because right after I watched that scene is when we had our campaign last night. So we were talking to good old Laura Dern in our campaign, and I was like, Laura, you dirty bitch. No, I do need to get caught up on the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. Someday I would like to watch Brooklyn Nine-Nine. I feel like I've gotten through the first half of season 1, and I keep on getting, put on another path of some kind of literary or other TV show that I must pursue. But I would really like to just watch Brooklyn Nine-Nine one of these days. That would be nice. So is this going to be like a love-centered episode? Should we totally talk about like love in this full episode of Valentine's Day?
I mean, we're going to talk a little bit about love because PETA's in this episode, and
PETA.
There's some drama going on.
Drama. This episode was a little tough, too, I think, because the next 2 chapters here, and I think probably the majority of the rest of the book, we see a lot of it being more action-driven. It's going to be a little bit faster paced, and there's not as much to break down in terms of socio-political analyses, at least on my side. So really what we're going to be looking at is the action sequencing, I think, and it's a little less to break down, I think, just in terms of we're not going to go on big, long socio-justice, rantings throughout the rest of the book. But I was thinking...
Not as often.
Not as often. I mean, we still will, absolutely. If you've met us, we absolutely will find a reason to.
Yep.
I was also thinking about how, well, let's back up. At the end of the last episode, we actually forgot to mention a major turning point in the book. We were too busy being doom and gloom. Yeah. And that is that, hey, she's actually in the Hunger Games now. Do you remember that? Like the actual Hunger Games, what the book is named after, and the actual central plot of the whole book, which might have been nice to mention when it happened, but we didn't because we were too busy being us. But in any case, at the end of this last chapter, chapter 10, she finds herself in the Hunger Games live and ready to kill, sort of. And what's interesting, I think, about this is that the central conflict of the book, really the big, okay, here it comes and this is what we've all been building up for, is pretty far into the book before we see this. And, normally I think people would be criticized for putting kind of the very beginning of the extreme rising action so late in the book. But in this case, it works really well. We are, I think, about halfway through, or if not more than halfway through of all the chapters at least. And we're just now getting into the meat of it. Like, this is the Hunger Games. We've spent so much time world building, which I think is really interesting. And I like it. I think it works really well for this story. But it was something that I was thinking about today, where a lot of the other books that I've read, to name a few, the Gone series by Michael Grant, that one picks up right at the beginning of all the central action. Aragon is another one where I think within chapter 1, he discovers the dragon egg and, is thrust into his adventures. I mean, Twilight, for example. Twilight, we meet Edward within the first 20 pages of the book. I think it also goes to show how much thought and building Collins really put into this world. And on that note, we're actually going to take a U-turn away from the Hunger Games here for a quick second, because as I hope you may have heard, you may not have heard, there is a prequel book coming out here shortly, within a couple of months. I think it's May is the release date. And they just had, on at least in our time, because we're recording this at the end of January, there's just been some interesting and potentially divisive news dropped about the prequel book. And Lydia, do you want to talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so a couple of days ago, an article came out saying basically what the prequel, which is called A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, is going to be about. And it is going to be released in May. I need to pre-order it on my Kindle so that I can read it right away. A major controversy with this latest news about the prequel is that it's going to be about President Snow. It takes place 50 or 60 years before the Hunger Games series. And so it's about a young Snow who is, I think, a game maker, or is one of the people involved with the tributes, like kind of like in Effie's position, I think. And so it's about how when he was young, he rose to power within the games and how he shaped the games as Katniss knows them. So before, they were boring fights in unadorned amphitheaters, kind of like direct copy-paste of Roman Colosseum. And because of him, they became the variety show that we see in the Hunger Games trilogy, with all of the tech and all of the manipulation and the game makers' intense involvement with the games for the purpose of entertaining the capital citizens. And he really turned it into a form of entertainment as opposed to just tribute. So it really became for the capital people and for their enjoyment in his time influencing the games and rising to the presidency.
And so that's what the book is primarily going to be about, is him shaping the games, or do we know kind of where we're picking up in that storyline?
We don't know exactly. We just know that it's going to be about Snow. It's going to center on him. I don't know if it's going to be third person or first person, but it's going to be about basically his rise to power. So probably begins with him as a humble advisor to a tribute and ends with him as president. That's what I would guess. And a lot of people immediately had a lot of thoughts on this, namely that we shouldn't glorify the kind of dictator figure. It would be like making a movie from the perspective of a Hitler and the message being, oh, he's not such a bad dude.
Which, I'll be honest, that's kind of what I thought initially when I first read the news that it was going to be centered around Snow. That was kind of my first knee-jerk reaction, was like, why on earth would she make a book about this guy? Why would she write about it?
Yeah, it's like, why would you make a movie where President Trump is the hero of the story if you're not on his side? Which I think we can fairly assume that Suzanne Collins is not on President Snow's side, because the whole point of the original trilogy is that he's bad. I have a lot of thoughts kind of paralleling and countering the original reaction of a lot of people against this, and most of it involves, like, it comes down to the fact that I trust Suzanne Collins as an author, and that I think what she did with the Hunger Games trilogy and what she's done with so much other stuff that she's written puts her in a good position to write this in a way that is not going to be glorifying the violence of President Snow. Part of the reason why people immediately reacted against that was because we see, like, the direct comparison between a lot of dictators and a lot of really selfish, narcissistic world leaders in President Snow. And our immediate instinct is to cancel, which is both a product of the Internet of Things and also like our individual, well, that's bad, get it out. And so it makes a lot of sense. I'm not saying that anybody was wrong to react in that way. I just think that I might have figured out what Suzanne Collins is really going to do with this, because I trust her enough not to write a story that glorifies the violence of the Hunger Games. That was not the point of her original books. And so why would it be the point of the sequel?
Right. And well, we've gotten into a couple of different discussions about her past. You know, her father, I think, as we mentioned in the first episode, was a member of the armed forces and took her and her siblings and her family to battlefields and explained the history behind it. So she didn't really grow up glorifying that violence either. She really does a lot of background work, and I think has put a lot of time and research into really understanding conflict. So, you know, I would agree with that statement there.
She does her research. She treads carefully, and she brings stories to light in a way that, like, even in the first half of the book, there was so much complexity in the world. And this is a book for preteens who wouldn't notice most of that stuff.
I certainly didn't.
Like, yeah, neither did I. But she's put so much detail and so much work into the world that I can't fault her for making this decision. And so here's what I think is going to happen in the prequels. Obviously, we don't need any more stories about how violent men became violent, and we don't need stories that justify them or make us sympathize with them or anything like that. But the thing is, we as people are slowly growing to a point where we can see that all the monsters in this world, all of the awful people, all of the world leaders who make life or death decisions and choose death for their people are human. The Hunger Games was about black and white. The leader is evil, you kill them. That's the end of the story. The thought that maybe these irredeemable people might have once experienced compassion and been different is out of our range of thought, because we can only judge the here and now of the Hunger Games series.
And I'd say that's also a lot of our culture in general.
Yeah. The prequel, I think, is going to give us the opportunity to see how people become monsters. Not so that we pity them, but so we know how to resist them. So the Hunger Games, a large part of what I think inspired us and inspired the generation that read the Hunger Games and related to Katniss was that it taught us that teens have the power to resist unjust adults and their unjust systems. And now the prequel, I think, is for the generation that grew up with the Hunger Games and that is adults now, and is probably, I think, is going to teach us that as adults, we have the responsibility to not become those evil leaders, to not become the unjust adults that we resisted as teens and that we glorified the resistance of as teens. So really, it's a story that the Hunger Games was for us as tweens, and I think the prequel is really going to be targeted towards us as adults now. Because we've grown since we originally read this, and our world has changed. And I think Suzanne Collins as an author recognizes that and is going to create a story that speaks to our present time and that speaks to the generation that took such inspiration from Katniss and now often despairs because we have no idea what to do.
If anyone else's jaws are on the floor, that was also my initial reaction when Lydia threw this all at me.
Yeah, didn't I text that to you at like 7 a.m. or something?
I think you did. It was like 7 a.m. and I was like, oh God. All I could respond in that moment was a gif of Nicki Minaj just slowly blinking and being like, what? But, you know, the more that I've thought about it and thought about what you said and then hearing you reiterate again here now, I think you're absolutely right. At least I hope you're right. I hope to God that you are right, because not only is this potentially a very good, it's just there, the potential for this book to make the kind of impact that you're suggesting that it can and may make, that is an incredible opportunity. I think there's an incredible opportunity behind this book that hopefully, with any amount of luck, Suzanne Collins has also recognized and is tapping into. Mm-hmm. And I want to say that she likely has, having been disappointed in the past by many movies, books, political outcomes, men. I'm a little hesitant to say, yes, she's got this, because I'm just naturally going to be a little bit more skeptical. But I think there's a very good possibility that you're on the right track. And I really hope you are. And I really hope that Suzanne Collins is taking this opportunity to really show us, you know, hey, by the way, once upon a time, President Snow was a teenager. Once upon a time, Donald Trump was a teenager. Once upon a time, Hitler was a teenager. And something happened to make them the way that they are. And now we have a responsibility not to just despair and hate the people who are fighting against everything that we believe in and are, you know, trying to strip people of their rights. But also we have a responsibility not only to fight the monsters, but not to become them. You know, we have to make sure we don't become the monsters. And I think that's, it's a perfectly timed book. I have to wonder when she started writing it.
I would guess 2016.
That's exactly what I was thinking. And I really hope you're right, because it's such a good moment in time to make this kind of book. I hope that you're right. Suzanne Collins, if you listen to this, it's not too late to change the release date. If you need to make some edits, it's fine.
I'll be your consultant.
No. But, it's great. It's good. Real quick, just wanted to toss in there that, so the article that we were referencing, it looks like it was published in Time magazine by Mahita Gajanan, and I truly hope that I pronounced that right. I'm sure I didn't, and I apologize. It was published on January 22nd, 2020, and the title of it is Hunger Games Prequel, Court's Controversy Over Its Choice of a Main Character, and goes into the idea that the excerpt is based around young Snow as a top student at a college called the Academy on the morning of the reaping. Oh, there was an excerpt.
Oh, now I gotta read that.
Yes, I didn't realize it was an excerpt.
Yeah, me neither. The thing is, though, I would not trust every single author of YA books to do this, but I think I would trust Suzanne Collins.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I wouldn't trust J.K. Rowling to have this message in a years later sequel to Harry Potter.
Turns out
that's
she's
not what she did with Cursed Child.
No, and turns out she's problematic as fuck. So, and that's not what she's doing with Fantastic Beasts either.
Right, no.
Which isn't, like, I mean, which is fine. Like, it's her art, or it's her world that she created. I think we've kind of taken it from her now at this point, but it's not like she's required to do this. But I think you're correct in saying, given her past history, she wouldn't necessarily create a story like the one that you're proposing.
Yeah. It's important for young adult authors who write sequels later on to know how their audience has grown and how their audience has been shaped by their original work, and if they're going to write something intended for that original audience, to know, well, what is going to fly, what is not. And that's not to say that you can't create art just for yourself or just because you want to tell that story. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that if you're creating something for a particular group of people who have trusted in your art, it's hard not to disappoint them years later. And Suzanne Collins is one of the few authors that I would trust to not disappoint. Rick Riordan is another, because he's really grown as he's expanded the Percy Jackson series and added tons more diversity. And basically, we in the writing community call him Uncle Rick.
Oh, do you really?
Yeah, because he's such a supporter of young authors and aspiring authors and people who are just starting out writing. And he's such a wholesome man.
I didn't know that. That's awesome. Is that something that you would have talked about in your classes at Pepperdine, kind of knowing your audience then and including that kind of growth idea? Because I feel like that seems like a pretty progressive idea.
Yeah, I don't think we talked about it just because in my classes we never focused on young adult literature, and especially not writing literature for an audience that is young and then writing for them as an older audience. I didn't take the children's literature class, and so all of my education in that respect was just normal adult literature, and we didn't really talk about audience that much. But I think it's important that if you're going to be writing young adult or children's literature, that, I mean, first of all, the entire message of the Hunger Games, children are people, and they're going to grow and change.
Yeah.
And you have to respect that in order to create for them.
You know, people tend to, I think, to shit on the YA genre. And, you know, there are some books out there that I think are problematic. You know, I've come across books that I've despised and thought the writing was poor, and that definitely exists, but I think that exists in every genre. And I think the reason why YA tends to get kind of targeted is because it's designed for an audience that is also targeted. But really, I think there's a lot of potential that could be go into really researching and creating education for upcoming authors to really look into the YA genre as a very important one. And I think that's definitely more the case now. I think there's definitely the chance for it to do so. But having a class that kind of discusses how audiences age and how to sort of set a tone for a book for a teenager, there's a lot that could go into that in terms of the psychology behind it, the continuation of the books, just, you know, continuity in general. I don't know. I think slowly but surely, I hope anyway, that maybe YA will get a little bit more oomph behind it and say, hey, this is actually a pretty important genre, because it's true. It does shape a lot of worldviews, as we've discussed, as has been our entire podcast, is that it does shape worldviews so much.
Yeah, and the prevalence of the YA genre is something that, I mean, I can't be objective about because I think every writer I know writes YA. But it's such a weird phenomenon. It was really weird how it came about. It's still relatively new, and it's such a growing field, and it's such a pioneer for a lot of ways of writing in the modern age. Like, a lot of YA nowadays is incredibly diverse, which is something that you just can't get from adult literature in a lot of ways.
Or that we got from YA when we were growing up and reading it.
Right, and so it's grown and it's developed so much in the time that it's taken us to just grow up. And first of all, it's amazing. Second of all, I think people shit on it because people shit on everything meant for teenage girls. Like, if a teen girl likes anything, then it's not going to become literary canon. Only old white men can decide that. It's not written by an old white man for an old white man. It's not going to become classical literature. And I think young adult is slowly but surely proving that wrong. I mean, like our friend Lauren, she teaches writing classes at the college that she's getting her master's degree at, and she's using young adult fiction in her classes as material, and increasingly we're seeing that happen where classrooms are reading and analyzing stuff meant for the teens who are reading them in class. I just think that's really cool.
I think it's cool too. Being a teenager, you know, and I think back up to this a lot, especially recently. So this being the first kind of serious relationship that I've had since I was a teenager, for me as a 16-year-old, the relationship that I had as a 16-year-old, it was serious. It was very important. And so I've been going back and forth thinking about how different I am now versus how different I was when I was first in a relationship. And doing that kind of just retroactive thinking, I'm also thinking about who I was in general, you know, not just in a relationship, but that's kind of how I got to that point, was like, oh, I was really different in my last relationship. Oh, I was really different when I was 16. And the thing that I'm really starting to notice is that it's such an important time to be a teenager. And it's really true that everything is so magnified and important, and your emotions and the way that you see the world, so much of that is shaped by your teenage years. And while you're not done fully growing and you still have so much to do, and you're going to change in so many ways after you graduate high school, or, after you turn 18, 19, 20, I think there really does need to be a really serious look at how literary culture and culture in general is shaping the teenage mind and just the way that we address them and treat them. I think a lot of the culture we see now is, oh, teenagers are dumb, and look, they need to be taken off their phones and da-da-da-da-da. Well, sure, maybe you're spending too much time on your phone, but really, we need to take into account the fact that there's so much psychological growth in that time. There's so much personal growth in that time. And I think diving into that more and really addressing it, especially in areas such as within literary culture in YA, and really kind of taking that into account, I think that could really stem to be not only a very interesting conversation, but a really important one. Am I making any sense?
Yeah. I mean, teens are people. And for the longest time, I don't think we've treated them as people. And now that, among other things, we have the internet and teens are on the internet, I think we see a lot more of that. I unabashedly love watching TikToks. I don't have a TikTok account, but one of the reasons I love watching TikToks is because these kids are so damn creative. They're so damn funny.
Yeah.
And I'm so excited for the people that they're going to grow into, for the adults that they're going to become. They're already people.
And I think a lot of people just see that and they're like, oh, these kids are obsessed with fame. I had a meeting once where we had a guest speaker who was like, oh, these teenagers, all they want to do are become rappers and Instagram influencers. It's like, yeah, that's what they want now because they're 15. They haven't finished growing yet. They're going to find out so much more about the world. They're going to change their minds. Give them their time to think what they want and say, yeah, I want to be an influencer. And if they become an influencer, fine. But, I would bet that a vast majority of them are also going to say, hey, the reason I want to be an influencer is because I feel passionate about this. Or, hey, the reason I like to always post on Instagram is because I like art or something. It's like, give them a damn break, would ya? And stop making it seem like it's the end of the world that they like media and technology. And I mean, yes, there are very self-centered kids and teenagers on the internet, but newsflash, there are self-centered adults everywhere. So, we need to give them a goddamn break.
They just don't have Instagram.
They don't know how to work a computer. And then they yell at me when they call me about their 401k. And they say it's my fault that they don't know how to work a computer. Sorry.
It's a very interesting thing that teens now have public spaces that are all their own, where they can post anything they want, where they can be anyone they want.
Just let them be. They're going to figure it out. Yeah, let them be
and let them learn and be the kind individual that helps teach them about the world if that's what they want to do. Be nice to kids.
Just don't be a dick. Do you want to talk about kids being dicks and killing each other now?
I mean, sure, if we're going to consider that a roundabout way to get back to chapter 11.
Welcome back to Let's Unpack That, a podcast where and we are going to jump right in, I think, now. I think we have had a couple of different circles around that whole idea of teenagers, and now let's get back to teenagers.
Chapter 11, do you want to read the summary or shall I?
I'll read the summary. Chapter 11, Summary. Shit happens, period. And then Lydia actually put in an actual summary. So, Chapter 11 starts right after the 74th Hunger Games are announced. Katniss is standing in the arena. She looks around at the cornucopia and the supplies scattered around it. The tributes are surrounded by woods and in a lake. There are some less useful supplies nearby, and the bigger, more valuable stuff is closer to the cornucopia. Katniss sees a bow and a quiver of arrows near the center, and she debates running to get it, even though Haymitch told her she should run away from the cornucopia, run away, and not risk having to battle other tributes, because this is typically where the big killing happens. There's a big bloodbath. Everyone's fighting over supplies. This is where the majority of the tributes are going to die, is within these next couple of minutes. As she's contemplating it, she meets Peeta's eye, and Peeta shakes his head at her, and she misses the starting gong. Because she's been thrown off, she ditches her plan, grabs an orange pack, fights a kid for it, and nearly avoids a knife to the throat from the District 2 girl. Then she starts running and running and running. After a while, she takes stock of what the orange backpack, what's in it, and what she has now. She learns later that 11 tributes have been killed. She has no water. She learns from the projection in the sky that Peeta is still alive. At the end of every day, they project the pictures of the fallen tributes along with their district number underneath it, and that's how she's keeping track. So she knows that Peeta is still alive. And she settles into a tree for the night. She wakes up to the sound of a snapping branch and the sound of someone nearby making a fire. The careers come up and kill the girl who stupidly made a fire that's like a beacon in the middle of the night. And Katniss then hears a voice and realizes it's Peeta's voice and learns that he is now running with the careers. Big plot twist! So yeah, Peeta is running with the careers, which, as we've hit on a couple of times, they are the big bads of the whole group. And usually it's a very exclusive alliance. It's an alliance that forms every time there's a Hunger Games. You know, there's always going to be alliances formed, but particularly it's the career pack that is, Katniss comments as being something that recurs pretty much every year, happens every year. And it's exclusive. And then also that same thought is that she's come to consider the careers kind of the enemy, I think for several reasons, you know, them being privileged and them also being the deadliest ones in the arena with her. And I think for the majority of the time, she has thought that Peeta shared that opinion of her, that the careers were not to be trusted, that they were the enemies, that like the number one enemies, even more so than the tributes from the other districts, even though everyone is technically out to kill one another. It was the careers that really kind of had the enemy sign over them. So the fact that Peeta is running with them is very shocking for Katniss.
Makes you wonder how that happened.
It really,
did they
really
almost
does.
kill him and then spare him because he said that he could get Katniss for them? Like, they know that she is someone to watch because she got that 11, but did they approach him? Did he approach them? Did they ambush him? Did he ambush them? Like, how did that come about?
I would love to know the answer to that question.
You know how there was a Twilight book written from Edward's perspective? I wonder if there's a Hunger Games book from Peeta's perspective.
That would be fantastic. I would read that so fast because I want to know everything that he's thinking between the time that he leaves District 12 to the time that he gets into the arena. Like, I just want to know what he's thinking the whole time he's in training and being groomed for the cameras. I want to know what is going on in his head. Because we've talked about this. We don't know. And I want to know, damn it.
I don't think there's an official book, but there's probably a fan fiction that does exactly that, and I will find it.
And when you find it, link it.
I mean, we're going to do the same thing as we did for Twilight, which is in the last episode. We'll talk about good fan fictions.
Oh, yeah.
Because that was fun.
That was fun.
I love fan fiction. It's cool. It's interesting also that this is yet another chapter that the cliffhanger centers around Peeta. Like, in the last episode, we talked about the cliffhanger that is, oh, Peeta wants to be trained separately. And now we have, oh, Peeta's running with the careers. It's like,
well, but we also had,
experience...
oh, no, Peeta's in love with Katniss.
Yeah. So is this whole experience going to be centered around Peeta? Like, is he the anchor that Katniss now revolves around?
I actually never picked up on that. Good thought.
Like, I kind of don't like it.
I mean, I don't either, but it's a good catch, none the same. Yeah, it's like, oh, okay. How much of the story is reliant upon Peeta? Fair bit of it is. I mean, obviously, if Peeta hadn't gone to the Hunger Games with her, the story would have been a lot different. But I don't think she would have survived without him. And I'm not saying that because she's dependent on him, but the way that their story plays out, I'm trying to say it in a way like, it's not as if she could not survive without him, but I think the reason that she survives in this case is because of the way that his story intertwines with hers and how they eventually end up. Like, I think if she had gone to the Hunger Games with another tribute, her odds would have been great. I think she would have done well, but there's something about Peeta and the way that their chemistry works off of one another. I don't even want to say chemistry because it's not a romantic thing. It's not a romantic tie. It's not a dependency tie. It's just something about their two stories and how they crossed in this moment that really led to Katniss being able to survive this. And I don't see her being a successful tribute in really any other situations, like if she had gone with somebody else. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, I think Peeta is as much of a flat character as he can sometimes be. He's an essential one, and he's an essential part of Katniss's experience, not just because he has made himself her central experience, but also because they share a history, and her darkest moment was relieved because of him. And that's something that you just don't forget or ignore. And so their fates and their lives are inextricably tied together. I think that was right of you to say. I had a thought this week or last week. What if Gale had gone to the Hunger Games with Katniss?
Oh, God. That is a thought.
I mean, it would have been a fucking mess. But also, she wouldn't have Peeta's incredibly opposite experience and way of viewing life to counter her.
But also think about Gale at the beginning of the book. He's like, oh, let's run away. He would have been an excellent figurehead for any kind of rebellion if he had gone in. So either the two of them would have gone in like two kamikazes, or it would have been played in such a way that eventually I think Gale would have won, because the people who were behind him would have wanted him to and would have made him the face of the rebellion. That is such an interesting thought. Wow. Okay.
I think the opposite. I think without Peeta's softness and without that soft touch to the games and that tenderness that he adds, I think both Katniss and Gale would have died. I think the Capitol would have wiped them out and said, these are just rebel teens. There's nothing more to them than that, when there's so obviously more to Peeta than that, and more to Katniss by association.
In that same kind of vein of thought, if Peeta hadn't been there and he hadn't shook his head at Katniss and said, don't do it, she would have ran right into the fray. And I think there's a very good possibility she could have been killed if she had done that.
He holds her back, and I don't think Gale would do that.
No, I think the two of them would go in there thinking they were going to fight off everybody and make off with most of the goods in the cornucopia. I agree.
Roll the shit. They would maybe even take on the careers.
Kids.
I don't know if this is accurate characterization, but I view Gale as kind of impulsive, and like he knows that he's strong and that he's capable.
Okay.
And Peeta doesn't give himself that credit. Maybe Liam Hemsworth is just weighing on my mind in that way. It just comes across that way.
Have you seen the bad lip reading for the Hunger Games?
Yeah, like a long time ago.
I just always think about him going, Scooby-Doo. That always makes me laugh.
I'm going to have to watch that again.
I know. Oh, man. I also thought it was interesting that the landmines will blow you up if you step off the platform before the countdown ends. She mentions that if you step off of it, it blows your legs off. And I can't imagine that someone hasn't stepped off of it accidentally or on purpose, which is probably how she knows that it'll blow their legs off. I can't imagine that someone hasn't taken that leap and jumped off of the platform to, end their life before the fighting really begins, or really kind of be in control of their own end. But it seems odd to me that they would force the force field around the roof of the Capitol building that they're staying in, of the Tribute Center. It seems strange that they would have those force fields on the roof to present suicides, but this is allowed. I can't imagine that hopeless tributes haven't taken their own lives. But I guess then also having them do so would cause better drama,
I think the point of it is that the tributes' deaths aren't tribute unless they're public, and so anything that would allow them to die privately or quietly, or just have their deaths as their own, would go against everything that the games is. Like, they don't own their own deaths.
Yeah.
The games do. The country does. The televisions, the live projections own them, and therefore owned their deaths.
What little ownership they did have over their lives was taken as soon as their name was pulled from that glass.
Right. They have no privacy, they have no individuality, no nuance. And so it comes down to it, the word tribute.
Yeah.
Pixar, it didn't happen. Oh, I hate that I just said that.
I love you for it, though.
I mean, I'm gonna leave it in.
Yeah, you are. But it's kind of true. It is that idea of either that or it didn't happen.
Doesn't count.
I also wonder, with Katniss briefly considering disobeying Haymitch and is thinking, okay, Haymitch doesn't know that I'm fast. I bet I could run in and get it and get out and win. And she's thwarted by Peeta, of course, but I wonder if Haymitch knew that she would disobey him and hoped she would jump right into the fray. I got this idea in my head because it's like he knows how petulant she is and how she wants to pretty much disobey everything that he tells her to do. Like he has told her, you are hopeless. And so I can't help but wonder if he went in and thought, okay, well, I'll tell her that she should run. She won't listen to me, so she'll just run into the fray. And I think if that's the case, it was either to get her killed because he was sick of her, or because he honestly thought that she would do well in that fight. And I don't know. I'm wondering if it's reverse psychology, or does that get too meta?
No, I don't think so. I think that's valid, and it comes down to whether whenever Haymitch said that, he was like, what was he gonna be? Is he gonna be manipulative, or is he going to be brutally honest? Because he can be both.
I don't know. Unfortunately, I think Katniss is just manipulated throughout this entire book.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like we see the after effects of the gaslighting that we talked about in the last episode in this one, when she's like, I'm relieved Peeta's alive. I tell myself again, she's telling herself, that's somebody else's voice that she is telling herself, that if I get killed, his winning will benefit my mother and Prim the most. This is what I tell myself to explain the conflicting emotions that arise when I think of Peeta. The gratitude that he gave me an edge by professing his love for me in the interview, the anger at his superiority on the roof, the dread that we may come face to face at any moment in the arena. That's from page 157. She's been completely convinced by now that Peeta confessing his love for her was a good thing. We're less than 24 hours out, and that's still holding strong.
And she was pissed at him 24 hours ago.
Yeah, she was absolutely pissed at him 24 hours ago. And now she's not. And so I think she's still experiencing the after effects of that manipulation. And she's thoroughly still gaslit. And in a way, it has changed from others manipulating her to her manipulating herself with their voices in her head.
Right.
She's really playing the game in these two chapters. She's really playing the game.
She is. She really, really is.
She thinks about the cameras more than she thinks about Prim.
Yeah. No, she does. It's interesting. She has a lot of fear in this section too. And I don't know. It's like, I was actually kind of looking into the little bit of the psychology behind the fear of, fight or flight and kind of where it comes from. And Psychology Today came in clutch as always. Right after that, on page 158, Katniss describes a general fear of dying to the localized fear of a girl in front of her. And there are different types of fear that humans experience. And I thought this was an interesting one to bring up, was that extinction, the fear of annihilation, of ceasing to exist, that is a more fundamental way to express it than just a fear of death. The idea of no longer being is a primary existential anxiety. And that is what she's experiencing here. And it's just an interesting thought because of how much that gaslighting is becoming her survival tactic, because she is that fear of that annihilation, the fear of ceasing to exist. She's trying to stay alive. She tells herself that it's for her family, and I'm sure it is for the most part, but it's also the very human anxiety of losing their life. So in part with that, the gaslighting is how she's convincing herself that she's going to survive, or at least how she's coping with her overbearing fear that she is about to die.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of what you were saying in the last episode about Survivor and how there are different aspects to the game. Like there's the physical, but there's also the psychological. And this is how she's psychologically manipulating herself into surviving in a way.
Right, exactly. This is how she's telling herself she's going to survive.
This is how she's staying sane.
Yeah.
So that is not to be ignored. That's a big aspect of the games.
Yeah, very telling. I want to get more into survival and alliance, but I wanted to get a little bit more into the politics of the game, but it's going to come later in chapter 12. So I do want to pick up on the fact that she's really playing the game. I really looked into this a bit, but I think we should press on and then I'll bring it back up. We'll circle back to it if that's okay.
Yeah, this is a record shortness for the first episode we discussed, 20 minutes.
Yes. Did you say first episode? Do you mean first chapter?
First chapter, yeah. Did I say first episode? First chapter.
I think you said first episode. It's okay. I typed episode instead of chapter in the notes at one point, so.
Oh.
It's great.
Too much TV.
No! Well, anyway, she apparently keeps time by telling herself that she walked for 5 minutes. I don't know how she did that. And then sleepy time, someone gets killed, and PETA is with the careers. Lydia, take us away. Chapter 12.
All right, chapter 12. Katniss is... This was hilarious to me. She's so surprised to hear PETA's voice that she nearly falls out of the tree and is like fully upside down on a branch, like belted into her sleeping bag.
Oh.
And is holding on for dear life to her bag, which is in her sleeping bag, so that it doesn't like fall or like flop down.
Oh my God.
That was just such a funny image to me.
Wish we'd had that in the movie.
Yeah. There's not enough humor in the movies.
No.
This is like a comic relief moment.
Kind of is, yeah.
But in that moment, she hates PETA so much for pretending to be honest with her on the roof that she actually wants him to die. She actually hopes that he dies. And so he goes off to finish killing the girl who made the fire, and the careers reveal in their whispered tones that they're using PETA to find Katniss. And then when they all leave, Katniss gets out of the tree and puts on a sly smile for the cameras. Then she roasts a rabbit that she caught in her snares over the remains of the girl's fire. She covers her backpack with dirt. She wishes for mud. And then she continues on, dehydrated and utterly exhausted. And she settles into another tree for another night. This tactic seems to be working, sleeping in trees. And the next day she wakes up and she's just even more desperate for water. She resents Haymitch for not getting a sponsor to send her some. And then she thinks maybe the reason he's not sending her water is because she's already almost found it. And she does. So she purifies it with iodine and drinks it slowly. She sleeps in another tree, and the chapter ends as she wakes up to see a wall of fire advancing towards her.
Yes.
It's a brutal chapter.
This is there's so much that happens in this chapter. Like, she almost dies. And I actually was reading this for the episode, and I had to go back and make sure that I hadn't actually read an additional chapter because so much happens. You know, I was like, wait, hang on, am I reading too far? No, we're still in the same chapter. Dang. Like, she almost dies.
Yeah, like we have two major hurdles in this chapter. I almost said episode again. And that is, the first is avoiding the notice of the careers, and the second is dehydration.
Yeah.
She almost dies for lack of water, which is how a lot of other tributes have died in the past.
Yeah.
And so she's already encountered two huge obstacles and survived them.
Right. I wanted to touch a little bit on the alliances again here because, you know, this is something that Katniss has noted has happened before in previous games, that the careers and alliances will often form. And you see this in Survivor, you know, you see people who form alliances and you know, compete the win. But really, what was struck me as interesting is that I think alliances are a part of any survival tactic. You need to have an ally with you to survive. Kind of a sad story, but we have a saltwater fish tank, and one of our fish was sick. It had some ick on it, which is a bacterial fungus that grows on their scales, and we need to remove it. So we added medication to the tank. Unfortunately, we added way too much. And this is a true story. And we ended up realizing far too late that we had put too much medicine in the water and half the fish had already died. We pulled out the rest of the fish, put them in the backup tank. But unfortunately, by the next day, most of our fish in our saltwater tank were dead, except for 2 fish. And the 2 fish who survived were our clownfish. We have our 2 clownfish, and they've been together for as long as we've had this tank. So they're pretty bonded at this point. They're always together. In the original tank, they were always together, and then now they're still in the backup tank. They're still together all the time. And what's interesting is, to me, is that they were by no means the strongest fish or the healthiest fish, but they survived literally being poisoned because they were bonded and took care of each other. I believe that. At one point, while we were evacuating the fish and putting them into the clean water, one of the clownfish looked bad, and I thought we were about to lose him. But the other clownfish was swimming right next to him, and it almost looked like the other clownfish was paddling the water around her other clownfish friend to get the water to move past his gills. Like, I swear to God, that's what it looked like.
Oh,
they
my
were together.
God.
I know. It's crazy. They were huddled together in the corner. The one fish looked like he was done for, and the other one was just staying by his side, flapping away, keeping water by him. And I'm getting a little off topic, but really, I think that goes to show that they survived being poisoned because they were together, because they bonded and took care of one another. And they were the only ones to survive. They were the only 2 fish that survived out of the entire tank. We had probably almost like 8 fish. They were the only ones to do so. And I think that just shows a very basic nature, like natural need that we as humans also have, that alliances are part of any survival tactic. You know, it's the same with humans. And as much as we like to think that we are capable of being solitary creatures, even as introverts who would want to be left entirely to our own, we need others around us and we need their support. And alliances forming in the arena may seem like a political plot, and I'm sure to the tributes at the time, they may think it is. You know, they're allying themselves with the strongest contenders, but it comes down to a very basic and deep-rooted survival tactic. You know, we align ourselves with the partners who we think are going to help us best. So, you know, note later on in the chapter that Katniss is close to death. You know, we talked about this. She almost dies of dehydration. She's the tribute that was by her. The tribute that was also by herself and lit a fire was killed almost immediately. Humans ally with one another to survive. And I think as much as the careers would like to think it's a game, I think it actually really reflects a very deep-seated need to be in a cohesive component of a group to survive until the next day. And if you think back even further, their whole lives have been very much in a group setting. They've been, you know, rumored in the academies. They've been brought up by the people around them. They have always had some kind of support and alliance. So as much as they like to think, oh, we're the strongest, we're going to be together and be the baddies together, really, I don't think they know any different. They don't know how to survive on their own. Katniss does. She almost dies in this episode, but for the most part, she is autonomous enough to herself that she can survive on her own until she finds an alliance again. I think it actually, I think it really much shows a weakness of the careers. I think if the careers weren't allowed to ally with one another, I think the games would be very different.
Yeah. That also explains why Katniss thinks so much about when she's nearly dying of dehydration before she finds the water. She thinks of Prim, and she thinks of not wanting to look like she's suffering too much for Prim. And that's, in the end, what gets her up, is that, no, I'm not going to suffer. I'm not going to die in front of Prim. This also explains why she constantly thinks of Haymitch and Peeta and why she keeps their voices in her head for, like, companionship, even though the voices are often manipulative and controversial, like we discussed. I think it also explains why she later allies with Rue, because, like you were saying, you ally with the strongest or the person most likely to help you survive. Rue doesn't help her survive in, like, a physical sense very much, other than, like, curing her of the Tracker Jacker venom. It's more in a spiritual sense that Rue gives her the motivation to continue on, even after Rue is dead, and even after everything is, like, for Rue. Everything is for Rue. And so I think that's a different kind of motivation to survive, but it's still a group. It's a strong bond.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right.
Oh,
I know.
Man, those fish, they got me.
I swear to God, man, it's the craziest damn thing I've ever seen. Like, we almost lost them because when I was in, you know, helping scoop out all the fish out of the poisoned water, and I scooped out that clownfish, and I was like, oh shit, this one's gonna die. Like, he looked bad. But man, if they aren't down there right now kicking ass in the backup tank, like, it's crazy. Yeah. No, I mean, I'm not making that shit up, I swear.
See, we all need something to live for, but often that something is a someone.
Wow, what a perfect note for our Valentine's Day episode. Aww.
Fuck off.
Aww.
No.
No, but I completely agree. So this is something that really bugged me in this chapter. And we're going to circle back to Katniss playing the game now. Because I picked up on this and I was like, wait a second, hold on. On page 164, she notes to herself that she needs to look one step ahead of the game. This is right after she overhears the careers telling each other that they're just using Peeta to get to Katniss, and she's essentially in on the whole plot now. And so instead of taking this news and panicking it, she immediately has a solution. She immediately knows how she's supposed to work this. And what really bugged me was, how is Katniss so good at doing this? Planning this kind of response and this act for the cameras, but she sucked so much at the interview. Like, she could not see, she couldn't make this kind of plan. She couldn't put on this facade of being one step ahead of the game and being confident. And she can do that in the actual arena, but she couldn't do it in person. And I couldn't figure out why. But I think I actually have come to a reasonable explanation as to why Katniss is so bad at politics. She can put on a show when she only thinks there's an audience, not when there actually is one. And I'll explain. When Katniss was walking from the District 12 City Hall to the trains after she had been reaped, she wouldn't let herself cry or show emotion because she believed that they were already watching. You know, she said, I can't look weak to the cameras. Everyone's going to see that I will be weak. When she's in the arena, she's putting on a show because she knows that they are watching. But when it came to this interview and the people in front of her, she couldn't act more than one way when her enemy, quote unquote, was right in front of her, even if it meant potentially losing sponsors. It's the same game idea. It's all within the same cloth, right? Putting on this act to win sponsors. But for some reason, she couldn't do it when they were right in front of her. She could not make the connection between the live audience in front of her and the potential for benefactors, whereas she's much more able to think and consider and plan without someone in front of her. And I kind of stepped into this and tried to break it down a little bit more. I think it's a little similar to the phenomenon of rehearsing arguments with people and rehearsing them in your head. You know, if you're in the shower and you're angry and you're pissed and you're coming up with a great argument in your head. And then, of course, when you're in person, none of that comes up. Yes. I thought that was interesting. So according to bodyandsoul.com, being able to rehearse conversations is a way to practice assertive communication. And it can also be seen as a reason to distract yourself from something that's distressing you. And I think in both of these terms, assertive communication and distraction is very valid in Katniss's point, because she's practicing this assertive communication when she's alone, whereas when she's in front of other people, she's actively being manipulated. This is her practicing assertive communication, but she's not able to bring it to fruition. And obviously distracting yourself from something that's distressing you. When she's by herself or in her mind or just thinks that there are cameras watching her, she has to put on the show because otherwise she's going to really be focused in on what her situation is. She can't do that when she's literally standing in front of the Capitol and is facing her situation point blank.
Also, the woods are kind of her home base.
Yeah, exactly.
She's definitely more comfortable there, even though she is in a death trap.
I also thought it was a little bit like stage fright. I actually called it stage rage. Katniss gets so focused on what's in front of her that she can't see the larger picture of how her current actions will affect her future. And that's when she sees the audience in front of her. She can't think past, these people are in front of me and I hate them. Being able to see the bigger picture is actually something that also Psychology Today, thanks fam, touched on a little bit. According to Psychology Today, the non-ability to look at the larger picture demonstrates a lack of self-control. Being able to see the bigger picture, or putting, quote, psychological distance between yourself and the, looking at the bigger picture, it allows for self-control, greater flexibility, and pursuing long-term goals. The quote from the article I really wanted to read was, exercising self-control requires ignoring the attraction of short-term temptations in order to pursue the long-term goals, which she's not able to do when they're right there, which heretofore is referred to as the equitable division of the asset. Wait, no, sorry, that's Legally Blonde. But it does fit in beautifully with Katniss's character. Her whole life has been survival. She has never had the chance to look at the big picture. Her whole life has been just get to the next day, the next week, the next time she can hunt, and the next time that she can get grain for the tesserae. So while I was sitting here kind of hating Collins and thinking, why are you making this character so just so petulant and tough to deal with? And I was really angry with her for a while. And I was like, God, this is such poor writing. It's actually kind of brilliant. It all fits in with her character. Being able to focus on the now and enjoy life while looking ahead is a luxury that Katniss hasn't had. She's always had to focus on the immediate, the short-term temptation, and what's in front of her, which is fucking brilliant. I was thinking about this, and I had this thought while I was at the office, and I had to immediately put down everything else I was doing and write it down, because it was like, wow, wait, it really does fit. Oh my God.
She's always been in an arena, in a way. District 12 was her arena, and now the arena is her arena. Oh, that's really sad, though.
I know.
Like, the fact that the games, even though she's never been in them, are so familiar to her.
I know.
Wow. Collins, why do you do me like this? Oh!
Oh, boy.
Jumping off the idea of Katniss being in her own arena in District 12 and now in the Hunger Games arena, I wanted to talk a little bit about free will.
Yeah.
Because one of the reasons I think Katniss is so, like, individually, like, she shines in these chapters is because nobody's telling her what the fuck she needs to do.
She's not being manipulated.
Yeah, I mean, she's kind of still being manipulated, but nobody's actively there to question her every single decision and to nitpick everything that she's doing and to force her to think about the bigger picture. They really micromanaged her at the training center, Haymitch and Effie did, and now she's free from that micromanagement. And yet she is a prisoner in the most deathly sense. Like, how can she be both free and in a death prison? So, does Katniss have free will in the arena? I don't fucking know. But for this, I mean, we're not going to go into a debate of like, oh, is free will real? Do any of us have free will? Because that's a neoliberal
That's a
trap.
different podcast.
Yeah, that's... I'm currently reading a book called The Age of Surveillance Capitalism by Shoshana Zuboff, which I highly recommend. It's really, like, damning of the companies of Silicon Valley who have made a profit out of observing our every move using devices and selling that, and, like, how that has shaped, like, how they want to influence our lives so that there is no mystery in how that behavior progresses. It's fucking scary. But also there's a section about free will, and part of it asserts that there are two parts to that: freedom and the will. So what is freedom and what is the will? Is freedom ignorance, or is it knowledge? And is the will a part of a soul or a part of the body? And are freedom and will really compatible with the human organism and the human society? That led me to thinking, in the case of freedom, Katniss can't go wherever she wants, but she can do whatever she wants in the arena. She can make her own decisions. Nobody tells her what to do, except that they kind of do. The wall of fire at the end of this chapter is the game maker's way of telling her to do something, to go somewhere else. So while she's free from the immediate nagging of Haymitch, she's not free in a positive sense. She's free from, but not free to. And then the second part of that, the will. Does Katniss make decisions based on her own will or the will of the Capitol? In both these chapters, we see her make a lot of moves to actively impress or confuse the audience. She thinks about the audience, I already said, more than she talks about Prim.
Yeah.
And she's like thinking about the games more than she's thinking about the purpose that she's going to live for. The rest of the time, it's a performance.
She kind of does drink the Kool-Aid in that way.
Yeah, and in a way, it's because she has to, and I think that she would convince herself that it's because she has to, but it's still a performance, and it's still, she's playing a game. That sly smile that I absolutely hate. The assumption that if there's not a battle going on in the rest of the arena, the cameras are definitely always trained on her. The knowledge that the audience saw her hiding in the tree and the dramatic irony of it all while the careers were nearby. She's performing, and she isn't always performing her own will. She's playing a game. So is she free and does she have her own will? Kind of, but kind of not. But can you really have free will if you're gonna survive? I don't fucking know.
Next time on.
Next time on the next episode of Despair with Us.
Everything sucks. Thank you.
Yeah, like what's going on? What's
Who
going
knows?
on?
Who knows?
Why is she playing it? Why is she suddenly into it?
I don't know. Guess we'll have to find out next
Yeah.
time on Let's Unpack That. Do you think we'll ever end this podcast on a happy note?
I don't think so. At least not while we're reading the Hunger Games. Fuck.
I guess not.
Yeah. Well, anyway.
Thanks, everybody. If you would
thanks
like
for
to
listening.
engage in discourse and tell us that we're wrong or we're right, especially if you would like to tell us that we're right, but also we would accept you telling us that we are wrong, feel free to do so. We are active on Twitter at Let's Unpack Pod, and you could probably find our personal Twitters on there somewhere. And again, if you are our coworkers listening to this, feel free to jump up and let us know what you think, but only if you are our coworkers. Once again, please don't hunt us down. And then I think that's all that I have on my side. Do you have anything to close with, Liz?
Just especially, we want to hear what you are reacting to the news about the prequel. Will you be reading it? Has this news turned you on to the idea of reading it, or has it turned you off to the idea? What do you think Collins is going to do with this story, and are you for or against it?
Ooh, yes, please.
Let us know, because, we're always open to hearing other perspectives on what's going to happen and what this might be like. Is it a money grab? Is it capitalizing on the fact that the Hunger Games audience still reads YA years later? What is it? Do you trust Suzanne Collins, or do you not? All of that is a valid reason to tweet at us. So as always, we will talk to you in 2 weeks with another episode. You can find us on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, and Stitcher. And until next time,
let's get this bread.